know it does.
So
And in a second, Grace is going to come up, but not yet. I'll tell you when you can come up. You can come up now if you want to, but you don't have to yet. But we are starting a 4-week series. It may end up being longer, just because I'm realizing even in tonight's message to get it ready, there's just so much that we can talk about and so much that we should talk about that I'm hoping tonight isn't super long and too much information, but also there is just, like I said, so much good stuff that I want us to begin to talk about at least. So for starting, I want to share with you a little bit of just why we're having this series, why we're talking about it instead of like doing a series on the book of James or something that we would do also. Why are we taking a break to talk about mental health? And I have a few main goals that I'll say from the get-go and throughout our series. And the goals are, number 1, I want mental health, being healthy, ill, struggling, all of it. I want it to become something that we are totally okay to talk about in this space. I don't know, do you guys feel like it's sort of a topic that's taboo, that's kind of not talked about that much? Do you ever feel that way? Especially in church, do you ever feel like, when I walk into church, I'm supposed to be okay? Like people ask, hey, how are you? And I'm supposed to say, oh, I'm good, how are you? And smile. Have you ever felt that way? Yeah, same, and I understand. I don't want that to be our youth group. I want our youth group to be a place where when you're not good, when you don't feel okay, it's completely normal to walk in and say, I've had a bad day, or today's been hard, or this week has been hard. I'm not doing great. I want that to be normal. And I think the first step in that becoming normal is talking about it. Second, I am confident, just based on this crazy year, based on stats, based on your age, that there are some of us in the room who are struggling right now, who if we filled out a survey that on one side said, I am 100% good, like living my best life, whatever other Twitter or Instagram hashtags you put with that, there's some of you that are like, that's where I am. Life is good, it's at its best right now. Then there's some of you that are kind of more like, I don't feel that great all the time. Like some days I feel sad the whole day and I can't explain it. Or sometimes I feel so anxious and I can't calm back down. And I want this to be a space where we can talk about the hope for those hard times. For those of you that aren't struggling, I know that is probably the rest of our group. I'm hoping that these upcoming weeks give you tools for days that might not be right now, but might be a year from now, or 5 years from now, where you have hard times and where you might struggle a little bit. And also, I want you to have the tools, or at least a baby foundation, because we only have 4 weeks and there's a lot more to talk about than just 4 weeks. I want you to have a little bit, at least, to be able to be a good friend when other people are going through stuff. Does that make sense? All right, cool. So to get started, could I have, let me do a quick count, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Let's see.
We do have 11 students.
Okay, 11 students.
Earlier.
Then to make stats easy, does anybody not want to stand up over the next 2 minutes? Perfect. Owen, you just watch right now, okay? Could I have 2 of you stand up?
Okay.
Oh, I like your eagerness. That's great. We'll have Abby and Landon stay standing. So 1 in 5, according to stats, of teenagers are currently struggling with a mental health issue or challenge. And we'll talk more specifically about what all that could include. But for example, in our group right now, that means there are likely at least 2 of you that are struggling right now. You can sit down. Now could I have 5 of you stand up?
Okay, wait, oh, that's fine.
Perfect, thanks. Now, half of you, almost half, just statistically, I'll rephrase that, 46%, which is about half, of all Americans, period, will experience a diagnosable mental health condition at some point in their lives. So it might not be right now, it might be when you're 20 or 40, but of the odds of our room, that would be half of our group would experience a hardship that we're about to talk about within your lifetime, even though it's not right now. Now, let's have 2 of you sit down, and then 1 of you like half sit down. Perfect, thanks. So half of you, so 2.5, you're a whole person, I promise, but for the stats, that means 2.5 of you will have those struggles before you even turn 14, which is our age in the youth group, right? You guys can sit down. Let's go ahead and have 2 people stand up, or 3 people stand up, sorry. Nice. 1 in 3, teens on average struggle with a diagnosable anxiety disorder. That could be a phobia, social anxiety, general anxiety, but an anxiety disorder of some kind. Go ahead and sit down. This stat is 13%, so we'll do 1 and a half. All right, sorry. So 13% of teens, again, in your teen years, will struggle or are likely to struggle with depression. So again, that's 1 and maybe 2, depending on how big our group is, people in our group right now. Go ahead and sit down. All right, now could I have 2 people stand up? This is the last one, I promise. Okay, so they did a study on different generations and how many said that they feel mentally healthy. They feel good mentally. Of older adults, this is the generation like older than your grandparents. So like, picture some of the older people you know. Only about 2 out of 10 said they did not feel mentally good. One more person stand up.
You got it?
Next generation down are the boomers. These are probably your grandparents, and also where the phrase "okay boomer" comes from. We're talking about grandparents. 3 of 10, so 70% say they feel good, but 3 out of 10 from that generation say that mentally they don't feel good. Next up, let's have 2 more people stand up.
Y'all were ready.
All right, you Gen X, these are probably your parents. So of your parents' generation, half of them would say that mentally they don't feel good. Stay standing. Now millennials, that would be mine and Josh's, and Grace and Brandon, are you guys millennial or Gen X?
Lord, I don't believe in labels.
So we'll just say me and Josh, that's our generation, so right above you guys.
I think you're Gen X.
Yes. Again, about half would
trying to
say
go down.
they feel good, the other half would say mentally I do not feel good consistently. Finally, Gen Z, this is your generation, is the first generation to tip the scales a little bit to where more than half, so 55, took me a second to do the math. 55% of you would say that mentally you don't feel good consistently or normally.
You have breaking records.
Yeah. So, you guys can sit down. Things, and Grace, I'll go ahead and invite you up now, and you can sit in this stool. I think it's safe to say that as the generations have gone on, as we've gotten closer and closer to your age, things have been a little bit more stressful and crazy, and the world is just changing and different. And I feel for you guys, because I know what it was like to grow up and be in high school like 10 years ago, and it's gotten even like more overwhelming and crazy. So I understand, and my heart goes out for you. Grace, my first question for you is, why do you think that mental health struggles have increased so much just as time's gone on and generations have come about?
Well, number 1, social media. Our lives are out there for everybody to see, everybody to judge, us to critique ourselves and figure out compare ourselves. Comparison, what they say is a thief of happiness. So social media, but also you guys have a lot of expectations to meet and a lot of, like you said, records to break. So everybody's trying to break the next record. So.
Yeah, I agree, and I feel like even with sports, it used to be like you played during your school season. Now there's 20 travel season options, and now there's not just school season and travel season. There's year round, and different teams year round. Oh, and there's AP classes and honors classes. And wait, you mean you're not keeping up with all the schoolwork and all the sports and all the things? Whoa, it makes sense that things are kind of hard. So let's identify what we are talking about when we talk about mental illness. The definition is the condition that affects a person's thinking, feeling, or mood for a sustained period of time. So when we talk about mental illness, we're talking about a huge range of different things. from anxiety disorders, depression, suicide ideation, eating disorders, self-harm, post-traumatic stress disorder, personality disorders, attention disorders, and the list goes on. So today we're just kind of introducing this topic as a whole. In the upcoming weeks we're going to talk about more specific parts of mental health, but today we're just talking about the general umbrella of mental health. So I think the best place to get started is to actually talk about or address kind of where we are now, just in culture, not like you specifically, even though I'm hoping that you're thinking that as we talk about this. But to talk about where is culture, where is society, where's the church, how do we tend to think about mental health right now? Like, let's point out the elephant in the room of the things that aren't quite normal or how they should be. So, Grace, how do you think in our society in general, how do we tend to think about mental health and mental illness and just all of it?
Well, can I ask you?
Yeah.
So how do y'all think, when you hear the term mental illness or mental health, what words come to mind?
Depression. Go on.
Anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
Attack.
What was that?
That's a good one.
Attack.
Mm-hmm.
Crazy.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Jennifer?
Scared or scary.
Mm-hmm.
Alone.
Mm-hmm.
Insecurities.
Mm-hmm.
Trapped.
Trapped.
Any others? So were those words positive to you or negative to you? Negative. That's usually the way we think of mental health. We think of it as something negative, something not to be talked about, like Morgan said, something to be maybe ashamed
I
of.
was gonna say shame is what.
Shame is a big one.
I think a lot of times why people find it so taboo and hard to talk about is because people who legitimately have, bad mental health issues, a lot of people fake it for attention and stuff. So if they come out like, hey, I'm really struggling with this, somebody might say, well, you're faking that for attention. You're not important. And I think that that's one of the biggest reasons why so many people just hide it and don't actually go get help for it.
Yeah. It's usually a lot of shame, a lot of guilt, a lot of fear that comes with mental health, a lot of loneliness. Sometimes people think they're the only one dealing with it.
And like, what's wrong with me?
What's wrong? Yeah, something must be wrong with me.
Yeah.
Nobody else goes through this, Also, the church. We are all Southern, most of us, and the Southern church says that you just need to pray harder.
Yeah.
just pray some more.
They
You'll
say
be
it in the
okay.
north too, if that
Oh,
helps.
really?
Yeah.
Just pray about it, you'll be
Just
alright.
pray about it. You'll be alright.
Yeah, you could doubt, question your faith.
Yeah.
If you don't have enough faith in God to be able to battle that.
Yeah, so I think, before going farther, let me just paint this as clearly as I can. I am not a professional counselor at all. I went to school for ministry. And the things that I'll be sharing today and in the future are not my words, and they don't come from me. They're not Morgan's thoughts. These are thoughts from professional counselors, people with PhDs, people who are in the field and are Christian and who I have a ton of respect for, that I'm taking their thoughts and their things and trying to share it with you. So before we go farther, know that I'm passing it along. These aren't my original thoughts at all. But I think one of the things that we tend to do when it comes to mental health is we like to put people in boxes. We like boxes in general. For example, when we cleaned the youth room closet, who all helped with that at some point? It was a big project. Do you guys remember? So we pulled everything out on the tables and started organizing all the different things. And then, do you remember what we did with all the different things?
Put them in boxes.
We put them in boxes. Yeah. When I saw that closet and the chaos that it was, my first thought was, oh, I'm gonna go to IKEA. I'm gonna buy some boxes, and we're gonna organize so the popsicle sticks are together and the pom-poms that I don't know why we have, because like I don't know, we have them, I don't know why. But anyways, everything has a box. And I love boxes personally. When Josh and I first got married and moved in together, I remember my closet that I had as a single person changed upon marriage because now it was our closet. And so for Josh, like there's a shelf, we each have a shelf above the place where we hang our clothes, and I gave him boxes to put like his socks in and like his undershirts and like anything that would go on the shelf, sweatshirts. And so I have these big clothes boxes, and I said, here are boxes for you, thinking I'm helping him. And he was like, what do I need a box for? And I'm like, my brain is not computing. Of course you need a box. Like, you don't just put things on the shelf, you put them in a box on the shelf. And he was like, that doesn't make sense.
You have to take the box down.
Yeah, because he was like, instead of just grabbing it, I have to go through another step to get it. But anyways, all that to say, I think typically we like boxes, and we like to put things in boxes and have clean cut order, unless you're Josh with socks, because he does not like it. But I think we do that when it comes to mental health, that we sort of have in our head, and I have a picture here to help you have the image with me. We like to have these two boxes, or we tend to have these two boxes. And these two boxes are fine or broken, or not fine, not all together. Whereas fine is good, everything's together, everything's right, emotions are good, thoughts are good, life is good, like everything is Instagram worthy. And the broken is not. It's everything that's not, right? And so with people, I think if we hear about mental illness, we immediately think like, oh, like that person now goes in that box of not okay or broken in some way. And let me tell you what I think of this, and what, again, the people who know what they're talking about above me think of this. We should blow up the boxes. The boxes don't exist, so we tend to think of it in that way, but there's no such thing. First off, hopefully you have learned this before this point in youth group, we are all broken in need of a savior, right? That's like a huge part of our understanding. None of us have it all together at all the time. There are different things that we'll be growing in, struggling with. Nobody is fine all the time, period. And also, if somebody's struggling, that doesn't make them damaged goods. They are no longer not good and valuable because of a struggle. So those two boxes, they shouldn't exist. But I think that's what we tend to do, is put people in those two boxes. And I think especially in the church we do that, is we tend to put like the people who have it together are the people that like, wow, God really worked in their life, and like God's gonna use that person for mighty things. Whereas scripture is filled with people who like, they were a mess. And to give you an example, the other day I was reading in Kings a story that just, I did not know was in the Bible until that moment. A lady, there's a famine in the land, and another woman came up to her and said, because there's a famine, like they were desperate, she said, can we kill your son and eat him today? And tomorrow we'll kill my son and eat him. And she fell for it, like she did it. And then the next day she went to find the lady, and the lady was gone. And I was like, what? This is in the Bible? This is weird. What on earth? Like, how could you do that? But anyways, even like the big people, David, Peter, Paul, like all these big people, they're messy. Like they have things they struggle with and they're broken with. So I'm going to transition back to you, Grace. Do you think there's a certain type of person that tends to struggle with mental illness?
Nope. There is no type of person, certain type of person or people group or ethnic group or gender that struggles with mental illness more than others.
That's what I thought.
Everybody's fair game.
Yeah. Young, old, really achievement driven, not achievement driven, or more laid back. I agree. With being mentally healthy too, I think we also tend to have boxes for this as well. Again, we like boxes, right? We like things to be clear cut and nice. So I think with our mental health, we tend to do the same thing, where we think that either mentally we are healthy or we are not. And that's it. There's mentally good or mentally bad, and that's just the end of the story. But I think this is something one of the counselors shared, and I just love it and think that this is so true. He says that mental health is more on a spectrum than just good or bad, or healthy or ill. And he said, think of it as you have healthy on one side, you have ill on the other side. And then on the spectrum, you don't stay in the same spot throughout your life. But instead, you could move towards health, you could move towards illness. Typically, we are on the spectrum, but moving at different times and in different parts of our life. Like you could probably imagine a year or a month or a week that was just a bad week or month or year. Do you know what I mean? Has anybody had a bad just span of time? Yeah. So what makes a mental illness diagnosable, what takes it to the point where it is, I guess, could be classified as diagnosable, is when you move towards illness, but then you stay in that spot for a long period of time or a sustained period of time, and then symptoms from that begin to show up and kind of disrupt things. And it's sort of like, I forget who said being stuck, but it sort of is kind of like feeling stuck in that spot and not able to get back towards healthy again. Do you have any thoughts on that before I go to the next thing?
That is spot on. And with mental illness, people usually seek help for mental illness because they do get stuck and they can't get out and they haven't developed those coping skills. Every healthy person has coping skills, and sometimes we don't know how to utilize those coping skills.
For example, I could tell you that one of my negative coping skills is I'm a stress eater. So like in college, for example, when you have the unlimited meal plan and the most stress you've
Yes.
felt today in your life, I ate so many cookies. It's only the sweets too, but that would be an unhealthy one. Whereas a healthy one would be journaling about it, or going for a walk and praying, maybe. That was such a good addition. Something else that I think we get really fixated on are the causes. I don't know if you've ever like shared or opened up to someone and then they're like immediately trying to analyze and figure out like, oh, why are you depressed? Why are you anxious? Like, what's going on? Let me figure you out. I think that's one of the big things we do that isn't necessarily helpful or good. And let me give an example from John. Here's our picture of Jesus and the characters in the story. It says, as Jesus passed by, he saw a blind man from birth, and his disciples asked him, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? Jesus answered, it was not this man that sinned or his parents, but that the works of God might be displayed in him. So here in this moment, Jesus sees this man and is interacting with him, and the first thing the disciples do is, whose fault is it? What's the problem? What's the cause? What's the reason? Well, this man is sitting here. Like, they're talking about him like he's a theology problem of what's the cause of his blindness? Since he was born and he's suffering, surely there's a reason for his suffering that we can explain it with. And Jesus took this idea they had, because at that time they understood or had the idea that, you know, if you were born with something, it was the cause of your parents' sin or generational sin or your own sin or something. Well, not your own sin because you're not born yet, but different illnesses, they thought of them as the result of sin. And so Jesus was taking this understanding they had of why people suffer and getting rid of it. And pretty much saying this simple idea you have for why people suffer, that's not quite true. And I love an example from the Old Testament is Job. Are you guys familiar with Job?
Yeah.
Have you ever opened the Bible to Job and you're like, why is there a book about Job? I did that like through high school until I heard someone preach about Job, because people don't talk about him that much. And I was like, who's Job? Picturing like there's a book about jobs, but I don't know who Job is. Anyways, but with Job, you know, he lost basically everything. And as he's losing things, his friends come to him, and for like a very short time, they're good friends, and they just sit with him. But it doesn't last very long at all. And then they start saying, all right, Job, come on, confess your sin. Just confess your sin already so your suffering will stop. And he's like, no, like really, I'm not sinning. I'm not doing anything wrong. And he had no reason to explain the suffering. And his friends were like, no, there's a reason. We need to fix your suffering. And that's not always helpful. Grace, do you notice that there are modern day stories of that playing out at all? Like, do we see people and try to be fixers or interact in that way, I guess?
Yes. All the time, all the time. We say, why are you sad?
Mhm.
What happened, you know? And sometimes it's unexplainable, you know? Sometimes the sadness is unexplainable. No one event caused it. Or addiction, or things like that. It's always like, well, something had to lead you there.
Mhm.
That's probably that's some lingering from even back in those Bible days, I think, as far as the church goes, that, I mean, immediately, even for myself, if I struggle with something, sometimes the devil will say, what'd you do to cause this to happen, you know? So I think that is something as a church that we definitely have to fight against, as that you did something to make yourself that way. You know, obviously, sin has consequences in other arenas, but for something like that, we have to be very, very careful and gracious to ourselves about that, I think.
And I like how you said there isn't a one thing that caused it, because sometimes it's not just one thing. It's like things that build up over time. It's like, well, this little thing happened this day, and then this little thing happened right after that, and then this little thing, and then this little thing. So it's like, it's not one thing that just made you like super, super sad. It was just like, oh, that made me a little sad, and then that made it a little worse, and then that made it a little more, you know? So I like that you threw that in there too.
It's like the snowball effect.
Yeah.
You know, usually I teach this class called verbal de-escalation, and I'll show this picture of an iceberg, and we see what's on the top of the iceberg, right? We just see the big chunk of ice floating on the top. But if you look underneath the surface, if you could see the bottom of the sea, of the ocean, you would see that ice, that little piece of ice goes very, very deep. Very, very deep.
And I think I'm jumping off of this, and I just had this thought, so I don't know if this will make sense as I actually explain it, because that happens a lot when I think of analogies. Josh has heard a lot of ones go bad. But I picture like the days or times when we are struggling, and there is this iceberg and there's the tip on top. Our tendency is just like, if we're in the iceberg situation, say we were up on our little boat and we're like, wow, there's an iceberg in the way, I need to get around it, but what do I do? How do I fix it? And then imagine like taking an ice pick and just picking away the top, and we're like, I fixed it. It's good now. The iceberg is gone. And I think that that's as silly as it would be to like approach people who are struggling and try and fix it and try and like figure everything out and make it go away. Because we're very uncomfortable with suffering or things that aren't good. Yeah.
It's like, we as a people, we like to know everything and just like try to figure everything out. So if you're like, alright, I know what this is, we can move on, I got it figured out. And sometimes, like, I was at my friend's church the other day, and he was saying, like, sometimes you don't need to know everything that's going on. You just gotta understand that, you know, you may not be doing super well right now, and there's nothing really you can do about it except for trust God that He's gonna take care of it. And for a lot of people, that's a really hard pill to swallow, because some people, you just really, including myself, you just really want to know what the source of this feeling is or why this is happening. And sometimes you just gotta be like, alright God, I don't know why this is going on, but you do, so I'm gonna let you take it over for me.
Yeah, I think and this is just a quick thought, and then I'll need to move forward just so that we finish on time. But I think one of the best things we can do, and it doesn't have to be a big dramatic challenge. Like, somebody doesn't have to be totally broken in pieces, but even just when someone's having a bad day, I think one of the most powerful things is to just sit with them and not have to like give the words that are an answer, or not have to like do something. But I know that's something that I've even learned more in marriage. Like, the days when feel sad and feel like I need to cry and I don't feel okay and this is a hard day. With Josh, I've told him too, I'm like, I just want to be able to cry, and he's awesome with it. He'll just sit with me and let me cry, and that's one of the most helpful things. And then after that, he takes me to the store to get a plant. I like plants, and it makes me happy. So, anyways, buy people plants and sit with
Plant
them.
time.
Yes.
Then
So
she cries on purpose because I hate plants.
he does. That's how I know he loves me. Is he takes me to pick out a new plant to go in the house. But I do want to talk a little bit about causes. Just because, again, I think the more we can take the vagueness away from things and begin to have like more information to talk about, I think that that's helpful. So yes, like you said, there's more than one clear cause of mental health challenges. If somebody ever says like, I can figure out what's wrong in like 5 minutes, they're wrong. They cannot figure it out that fast. So I want to share with you 2 different people. One is Brett Ullman, one is Eric Browning. Both of them are, again, in the field. Brett is a counselor who works with teenagers. Eric Browning, he works at Mount Vernon Nazarene University. Shout out to MVNU while on the Tribeca field. Anyways, they have different things they've shared as far as causes. Brett shares 5 reasons he believes we suffer. Number 1, we live in a fallen world and we're affected by it, right? In scripture, things were great and perfect for like 2 chapters, and then sin entered the story. And ever since then, we've been living in the story where we live in a world where sin is culminating. Like, our society at times gives in sometimes more so to the reign of sin or doing what we want instead of what God wants and God intends for us. And so there is that tension, and when people or society give in more to sin or what we want instead of what God wants, that's when things can be hurtful and messy. Number 2, other people's sins. An example of this would be if someone is driving and gets hit by a drunk driver. They didn't do anything wrong. I think that is a tragic and horrible thing that is just the consequence of someone else's sin. Number 3, our own sins. Sometimes we do make really bad choices and they're not helpful for us, and they do have consequences. Number 4, spiritual warfare. And I think different people, that's one of those areas where different people have different thoughts about it. I'm kind of more in the middle, where I feel like I don't say when I lose my phone, spiritual warfare. Like, the devil is attacking me because I can't find my phone. But I also don't think that it doesn't exist at all. Like, I'm not on that side. I think it is very real. It happens. And there are times when, like, you can be under attack in different ways. And then 5, sometimes God disciplines and disciples through suffering. Again, with the topic of suffering in general, we don't like it. Like, as soon as we have pain, we take ibuprofen or Tylenol. If we get a cut, we put, what is it, Neosporin? Neosporin on it. Yeah, I have a big tube at our house. Like, we try to alleviate the pain or the hurt as quickly as we can because we don't like it. But what's interesting is throughout scripture, I would say that there is actually purpose behind our suffering. That God can use pain in ways to deepen our faith, to grow us, to develop us, in ways that other things just can't. And suffering isn't always a bad thing, even though we don't like it. I don't like it at all. Okay, what's up?
A few weeks ago, I was kind of going through some not fun stuff, and my mom, I talked to her about it, and she sent me this, like, just randomly in the middle of the day, and it said, burglars don't break into empty houses. They break into something that has a lot of valuables in it. The devil attacks people who he sees that God is working in them. So the reason that, like, you're feeling bad or whatever, yes, Satan's getting to you, but he's only trying to get to you because he realizes that you are a threat to him because you're spreading the word of God.
Yeah, I love that example. That's really good. Then with Eric Browning, he shares some of the biology behind mental health suffering or challenges, and I love this so much that I thought, oh my goodness, you need to know this information. It will make your lives better. So first off, the average brain has 86 billion neurons in it. Let's see, I didn't know if I had a picture of that. I'm glad I didn't, and I remember why, because I can't copy and paste that many times. To make it more complicated, none of the neurons are touching each other. If you've been in anatomy class, you know this. I did not do great in anatomy. I had to listen to this like 5 times. But anyways, none of these neurons are touching each other, and the way they communicate and work together is through electrical signals. And the electrical signals are passed through chemicals. So picture 86 billion parts that only communicate through electricity, but the electricity works with the right chemicals in place. To put that in perspective, the average car has 30,000 parts. Vehicle, not just car, SUV, truck, vehicle has 30,000. So if you're like me, if you see an engine, that is instantly overwhelming. I see it, like I haven't even looked under the hood of my car but once, and I've had it for 2 years, which is really sad. I am not proud of that fact. But the amount of parts overwhelms me. And with cars, we understand that when one little piece goes wrong, it messes everything up, right? Like sometimes a spark plug, which is a tiny little piece, can mess up the whole engine or mess with it. Sometimes a wire not working will mess everything up. Just the tiniest part can mess it up. So imagine how much vehicles break down, how often you have to get a new one. They don't last forever. Now, take that to get to 86 billion, that would be 2,866,666.67 car engines is your brain. That's how many parts are in it, and they're not physically touching. So, to add on to it again, there's the chemicals, and of the chemicals, there can be 50 different types in your brain. So if you have the wrong chemical, wrong place, things aren't gonna work how they're supposed to. On top of that, your body's producing other chemicals. You've probably learned about them in health class. Hormones, yay! Especially when you're going through puberty. They're all over the place, they're going crazy. There are 40 to 50 different hormones that can interact with those chemicals that are helping with those 86 billion parts. Does that feel huge and overwhelming? Because when I heard that, I thought, it's a miracle that our brains are functioning at any good level, any of the time. Like, it is seriously amazing how God created us, that we are that complex, and that our brains are that complex. So that's some of the physical side. On top of that, God gave us each personalities. Some of us, you know who you are, you're a little more type A. When I was talking about boxes, you were like, yes. And if I were to mention lists, you'd be like, yes. I love lists, but not multiple of them, because then they can get lost. I have one list at all times, only. Some of you are more easygoing. The thought of lists and boxes just feels like it's trapping you, and it's too much structure, and you'd rather like go with the flow and have fun and laugh. And you don't want to schedule your day, because you want to have it be open to the possibilities. Some of you are like that. Some of you are more outgoing, some of you are more introverted. Some of you think a lot, whereas some of you process through talking or doing. We all have different personalities. Now on top of that, we all have different experiences. So the home that you're growing up in right now, that is shaping you. Your parents, your siblings, that shapes you. How school is, that will shape you. Anything that is traumatic or hard can shape you. These things can affect how we see our world, our relationships, ourselves, God, all of it. So when you put all those things together, just to talk about, again, causes, because we like to think, like, they had this thing happen, therefore it caused this. Put together all of those things now. Sinful world, fallen world, 86 billion parts trying to move together with the right chemicals in the right place, with different personalities and different experiences. We are very complex. And something that we'll talk about probably a lot down the road, I know in different specific lessons we'll be talking about it. All of those things can affect all the other things. And we're not going to dive into that now because we are about to time with our lesson, but I just wanted to share that with you because, again, with causes, we think like, oh, it's simple. This happened, it caused this. When really, God made us so much more complex than that. And it's a good thing that He made us as complex as we are, but also all of those things can come together to make a perfect storm sometimes, or things to be healthy and good sometimes, and they can change. Grace, do you have any last thoughts or general things that you'd want to say or share before we close out? Thanks to Erica and Britt, the people who are professionals at it. Yeah, one thing that we will talk about is a lot of what makes us us. We have physically what makes us, human. we have what's going on emotionally or mentally, and we have what's going on spiritually. All those things can affect each other, and we'll talk more about those, so I don't want to go into more depth today. But do you guys have any questions or anything that you want to clarify or talk about before we close out? Brandon?
Just have one question for Grace. As far as mental health, what's one thing that you've learned as far as mental health as a whole, as far as being a nurse? What's one thing you've taken away from it?
Good question.
Very good question.
It's better, you handle things better when they're in the open. Things that are hidden usually tend to get worse. So never feel that you're alone in the situation. Find somebody that you can trust and disclose whatever it is that you are going through. So yeah, just suppression and holding it in never makes it better.
Which is probably all of our tendencies. If we don't feel okay, the first thing we want to do is retreat, isolate. Don't let people know that you're not okay. Yeah.
And it's okay to not to be okay.
It's very normal. It is actually not normal to feel happy 100% of the time. So that is not normal. I know I'm wearing a shirt that says smile, which is very ironic for tonight, but that's not normal. Yeah. Well, cool. Any other questions? Josh?
What would be your best advice for somebody who's trying to help somebody through a tough situation?
Ooh, so like you have a friend at school or something that's having a hard time?
Or a sibling or a parent or a friend, yeah.
Well, I would say Morgan is the perfect example because she not only did she say, just sit and listen, that means a lot. Sometimes people answer their own questions when they talk, when they have the chance and the space to safely share. But also, secondly, she researched. Sometimes you have to go a little deeper. You have to go a little further with the problem. You can't just let the problem sit. Because sometimes it's not good just to let it fall on idle ears, but then to seek more help.
Yeah, and I think one of the really cool things, if you have friends or if you're struggling, we as in the adults are all people who are here to listen, to be the listeners, to be your cheerleaders, to bring you a coffee when you're having a bad day, or just sit with you, even if it feels awkward for the first 30 minutes. That's what we're here for. And all of us will admit we're not professional, and so if it does get to a point where it would be really helpful to see someone who it's their job to help you talk through things and figure things out, we would definitely point people in that direction too. Did we answer your question?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, good. Circling back around to make sure. Any other questions? Alright. I appreciate how attentive you guys have been and how much you've interacted, because I know this is significantly longer than a normal youth group message. Like I said, there's so much to talk about with this, and let me drive home the message again. Like Grace said, it is okay to not be okay, and this space is a space where you don't have to be okay. I want us to be able to talk about these things. So this is a starting point. We have a long ways to go of now putting this into practice.